Psalm 56:8. God collects every tear you shed. You may feel alone, but the truth is, He watches over you. Psalm 56:8 reminds us that God knows our sorrows and keeps record of them. When Hagar fled from Sarah, she felt invisible. Psalm 56:8. God collects every tear you shed. You may feel alone, but the truth is, He watches over you. Psalm 56:8 reminds us that God knows our sorrows and keeps record of them. When Hagar fled from Sarah, she felt invisible and abandoned, Genesis 16. But God met her in the desert, calling her by name. He sees you too. Whatever pain you're facing, remember that God understands your hurt deeply, and He is always with you, gathering your tears and bringing you comfort. Jesus understands your suffering, Isaiah 53:3-4. You are not alone in your suffering. Jesus Himself was called a man of sorrows. He carried our griefs and burdens, even enduring betrayal and rejection. Isaiah 53:3-4 reminds us that Jesus knows what it means to hurt deeply. Just as He wept at Lazarus's tomb, John 11:35, He is close to you in your pain. Remember, Jesus empathizes with your struggles and offers the healing you need. He is not distant, but right by your side. God sees your tears, Psalm 56:8. God collects every tear you shed. You may feel alone, but the truth is, He watches over you. Psalm 56:8 reminds us that God knows our sorrows and keeps record of them. When Hagar fled from Sarah, she felt invisible and abandoned, Genesis 16. But God met her in the desert, calling her by name. He sees you too. Whatever pain you're facing, remember that God understands your hurt deeply, and He is always with you, gathering your tears and bringing you comfort. Jesus understands your suffering, Isaiah 53:3-4. You are not alone in your suffering. Jesus Himself was called a man of sorrows. He carried our griefs and burdens, even enduring betrayal and rejection. Isaiah 53:3-4 reminds us that Jesus knows what it means to hurt deeply. Just as He wept at Lazarus's tomb, John 11:35, He is close to you in your pain. Remember, Jesus empathizes with your struggles and offers the healing you need. He is not distant, but right by your side, understanding your every tear. Your prayers reach heaven, Psalm 34:17. When you cry out to God, He hears you. Psalm 34:17 says, "The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them." Hannah's heart was broken as she wept and prayed for a child, 1 Samuel 1. God heard her cries and answered her in due time. In your pain, continue to pray. God is not ignoring you. He is working in ways you may not yet see. Hold on to the promise that your prayers do not go unnoticed. God is close to the brokenhearted, Psalm 34:18. When your heart is shattered, remember that God is near. Psalm 34:18 promises that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Look at the story of Job. He lost everything, his family, health and wealth, but God never abandoned him. Job's story shows that God is not absent in your pain. He is closer than ever. Lean on Him, even in your darkest hour, because He promises to be with you. God will heal your wounds. Jeremiah 30:17. God promises to heal the wounds of the broken. In Jeremiah 30:17, He declares, "I will restore you to health and heal your wounds." The woman with the issue of blood, Mark 5:25-34, suffered for years, but her faith led to healing when she touched Jesus' garment. In the same way, God will heal the wounds of your heart. Trust in His timing and know that His power to heal is still active today. He will restore your soul. God's love is unfailing. Lamentations 3:22-23. In the midst of your hurt, God's love is constant. Lamentations 3:22-23 reminds us, "Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. His mercies are new every morning." Ruth lost everything, her husband, her future, and her security, Ruth 1. But God's love never left her side. Eventually, he restored her life through Boaz. God's love is not dependent on your circumstances. It is steadfast. Trust that he will never stop loving you, even when life feels overwhelming. God gives you strength. Isaiah 40:31. When you're weary from the pain, God promises strength. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength." David often faced betrayal and despair, Psalm 23, yet he always turned to God for renewal. In your hurt, God can lift you up and give you the strength to carry on. Wait on him, and you will find the courage to rise above your circumstances. He is your comforter. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4. God is called the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4. When Naomi lost her husband and sons, Ruth 1, she felt deep sorrow. But God brought Ruth into her life to be a source of comfort. God uses people and circumstances to comfort you in your pain, just as he did with Naomi. Trust in his ability to bring comfort to your heart. God knows your name, Isaiah 43:1-1. In your suffering, you may feel like just another face in the crowd, but God knows your name. Isaiah 43:1 reminds us that God calls us by name, and we are his. Just like he called Zacchaeus down from the tree, Luke 19:5, he calls out to you in your hurt. You are seen, known, and loved by the one who created you. Rest in that truth today. Your pain has a purpose, Romans 8:28. God promises to work all things together for your good. Romans 8:28 reminds us that nothing in your life is wasted. Joseph endured betrayal, slavery, and false accusations, Genesis 37:50. But God used it all to bring about his purpose. Your pain is not meaningless. Even when it seems like everything is falling apart, God is working behind the scenes to create something beautiful from your brokenness. God's grace is sufficient, 2 Corinthians 12:9. In the midst of your pain, God's grace is more than enough. 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul endured a thorn in the flesh and begged for it to be removed, but God reminded him that his grace would sustain him, 2 Corinthians 12. You may not receive the answers you desire, but God's grace will carry you through. He promises to be your strength when you feel weak. God will give you rest, Matthew 11:28. Jesus invites you to bring your burdens to him. In Matthew 11:28 he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." When the weight of life feels too heavy, remember that Jesus offers you a place of rest. Just as he calmed the storm for his disciples, Mark 4:39, he can bring peace to your troubled heart. Take refuge in him, and you will find rest for your soul. God will never leave you, Deuteronomy 31:6. No matter how deep your hurt, God promises never to leave or forsake you. Deuteronomy 31:6 says, "Do not be afraid or terrified, for the Lord your God